so powerful in these mainly black men, have become so powerful in these unions that the combination of the economic reality and the fear of the potential power of blacks in a, not in a rhetorical way, but these are people who could stop the levers of in industry, that we have to find some kind of alternative. We need to find cheap labor and render black labor redundant, meaning you find somebody who can do the same labor, but it won't be rebellious and won't make demands for their for higher wages. And black people were just getting used to that quality of life that comes out of the ascendancies of the victories that had taken place during the more or less controlled civil rights movement and the Black Power movement. So the question was, where could we find the weakest link? And the weakest link was also the most dangerous, potentially dangerous link, and that was black youth. And that was why CIA brought the cocaine into the communities, and that's why, like where I work in LA with the Bloods and the Crips, who came out of the crushing of the Black Panther Party and the radical movement in LA. The Crips community revolution in progress. Crips. Community revolution in progress.
Wow, that's it.
Crips. Crips. Crips.
Wow.
These were young people who, like Charles Jones last week, he set up a thing called the Black Disciples. These were brothers who, in the wake of the collapse of the crushing of the Black Panther Party, and not only Black Panther, but other black movements or organizations in the LA area, they came together out of UCLA and set up their own, with the help of the Black Studies program, their own organization called Crips. The group that, as they began to deteriorate and move into warlordism, which is what happens when people have come together around a revolutionary process but don't have a political or spiritual goal or objective. Warlordism is not new to, it's not just about black folks. It happened in China, it happened in Japan, it happens all over the world. It's the collapse of it happened in Mexico, I mean, Mexico itself, South LA. All these were people who came out of the Mexican Revolution that was finally crushed in 1933. I mean, the things that we should know about ourselves is just extraordinary. But the reality is that what the reaction to that was a group, was a community who called the Bloods. The Bloods, what comes out of the notion of blood brothers, right? But they were organized because the warlordism of the Crips. So now you have the Crips and the Bloods both coming out of the crushing of radical movements, radical youth movements. So now you don't have the radical youth movements, they've morphed into warlordism. You have the crushing of the Dodge Revolutionary Union movement, right? You have the criminalization of the entire black youth population through the importation of drugs, called a drug war on drugs, right? So that's 1980.
Reagan.
1980. So now you're talking 2011. So what we're talking about is a mop-up operation. Because we now have 3.5 generations of young people having been institutionalized. The black leadership class, right? Women struggling to survive in the wake of men in prison. Men going to prison for 20 years and coming out and then having relationships with their cousins and their nieces, right? Because they've been gone for 20, 30 years. They don't have any connection with those folks. You understand? And that's going to tear the fabric of your community together. And you have right here, where I live in Oakland, California, you have uncles fighting nephews over space to sell low-level drugs. I know that may not be true here.
Yes, it is.
So that's how intense that is. How we get out of that, I mean, now if we can begin to recognize it, that's one whole set of things. The other set of things, very quickly, is the, what E.T. Howard called today the paradigm shift of the end of empire. one real reason for the crushing of this sector of the American nation, the American empire, meaning us. As you know, there's no visible critical mass of black leadership that has arisen. It does not exist. I mean, our visible leadership class is Al Sharpton and a couple of so-called public philosophers. That's it. That is it. I remember when we were in debates in SNCC where people were talking, saying whether there were 10,000 black organizers or 20,000 black organizers. Wow. Now if you can find 3 or 4, that's the critical mass. That's going on over time. The second piece then is what's happened to the American nation itself, the empire itself. And most of you know this. I was talking to brother here, brother and sister back there about how we came late into the toxic real estate market game. We started attending those meetings, and some of us made some money off of the real estate, and that's how some of us got out here. You know, I got to wherever we got. You know, I came down here in Atlanta, and there was a sister who had this was back in 2005, or I guess 2004. She had a forest and a lake, you know? And I was saying, wow, these people are doing this and that and the other. Went to China, 2004, 2005, working, doing training programs in China. And the Chinese was already saying, well, in 2001, there was something called the dot-com bubble. They were already talking about a bubble in 2004, 2005 that was going to affect the real estate market. They already saw what was happening. They were already trying to build internal blocks against that. And they forbid their banks to take on any of those toxic pieces. Greece, gone. Spain, gone. Portugal, gone. Ireland is gone. These are all bankrupt nations I'm naming. Right. Iceland, gone. Finished, gone. Not third world, fourth world. Gone. The only thing that you can do in Greece today is if there's tourists, you can run tourist spots or you can demonstrate. That's it. Because all the intellectual capital has been sucked away into the banking system, which now blames those people, and now they're going to go through a structural adjustment process where all the privatization of everything is going to happen to them. Well, that privatization is happening in this country right now. That's why now they've attacked and destroyed, with the help of sometimes the unions, the black community. Now those same public sector unions, which are now largely white, are now themselves being attacked and are being crushed. Why? Because in the final analysis, empire loves nobody. Empire doesn't love anybody. Empire has interest, not permanent interest, right? It has nothing that it loves except power. You know what I mean? Power is not a person, right? Power is the ability to define and control phenomena. And that's what, you have a smaller and smaller group into that. In 1980, when that position was laid out by the Heritage Foundation and the Enterprise Institute, it was the top 15% of the population of this country that controls 60% of the wealth. And now it's 1.5% of the population who control nearly 80% of the wealth. Well, is that a change? Is that a marked change? Of course, that means that's the pauperization of even the wealthy. Not the wealthy, the rich. Because that pyramid has gotten tighter and tighter. Well, what does that mean for us? Robert Reich, who was the Secretary of Labor under Clinton, wrote a book called The World of Work, in which, and I was trying to point this out a little earlier, he said you only need 16% of the population in the modern era to do productive labor. That means that's 84% whom there's no productive activity that can take place.
Useless feeders.
And if you got 16% of the population, between 70 and 75% of that population is going to be white in America. So you see what's left. Some of us we get the little benefits. We see us here and there, and we think, therefore. All right? That 86% is redundant. There is no value. So to warehouse them, to put them in the military, or to have them walk the streets, or to have them homeless, or to have them complete an education and not get a job, not get any position anywhere, would be normal, because that's the same thing that's happened in those places that I named. Ireland is now one of the most educated nations on earth, right? It's got 40% unemployment. These are white folks, hello? Spain, Portugal, high levels of unemployment, matching ours. Why? Because the structure of the global empire has pushed everybody downward, except for themselves. But they hit a crisis, they've hit a bump. And that bump is what E.T. Hari called a paradigm shift. 2004, 2005, let me take a minute. I spent many years in Africa. I lived in Tanzania. I worked in Ife in Nigeria. I have a little qualifications, as I said. I have a lot of degrees and stuff. In 1998, Dikembe Mutombo, who was a basketball player at the NBA, and Bobby Rush, and the sister who was in Alabama, she was the congressperson that the Zionists destroyed her position, McKinney. Cynthia McKinney. I went to the Congo when it was under Laurent Kabila. I took several millions of dollars, and the whole idea from Dikembe Mutombo was to reform the medical services in Congo. His mother needed dialysis, and that was part of his push to do this. And he couldn't go home, because if he went home, he was going to kill them. So I went over and took a group of young people. I always take young people wherever I'm going. And we set out to try to do a deal for that. I was in the Congo in June, meeting with both sides of what became a split in the government. I was in the Congo when the Civil War kicked off. I was in the Congo for about 3 weeks before it began, and a very desperate 7 or 8 weeks after it started. And I decided that at my age, that was probably my last Indiana Jones program. That was about, I think I'd about done it. Shaft in Africa. Oh, no. So, the question was, where is there a place to work to see if I could build some models? So since 1999 up until now, most of my work has been in Asia. And I've been working very closely with the Buddhist community there. The Buddhist community has, the Buddhists don't have every preacher says something different. What happens is that they read numerology and all this various things, and they come up with this position. The position is that of the five Buddhas, the Buddhas around Buddhas, 2 of them are women, 2 of them are male, and then the Buddha himself, and the first Buddha is black. And that was the Buddha who overlooked Buddha, acted as the protector for Buddha. And they have said, they've come to the position after reading all the tables that, as I just described some of the worst circumstances in our times, they're describing those as simply the things that we have to go through to get to the best circumstances of our time. And so they've decided that it's the African continent will be the next paradise, next place of blossom and bloom, and that the disparate African people are the reincarnations of the Black Buddha. Now, the way they operate is that means they don't care whether you're Christian or Catholic or Taoist. They don't care about that. They said they do education. Here's the educational program. So while this is going on, the American nation is falling apart. The toxics caught up with them. They were collecting. They had made bets that you could collect on the basis that people who didn't have jobs would be able to pay. They had made bets that they could sell overly valued property. They had made all these bets, and then they sold those to the rest of the world, except for Asia. Instead of what happened generally, and this is why people say Asia is moving up and this and that, and that, they were not, first of all, allowed to be a part of this process, right? Now, and I'm not talking sentimentality now. I'm talking about the reality of how the market is working. They were left out. This is something that I didn't talk about. I'm a person with, again, a lot of degrees, 2 PhDs and a law degree. I didn't know that the world was operating on perhaps a value of 1 quadrillion, the value of in money. Quadrillion. Well, that's 999,000 a million. So that means that we're not talking about trillions now. Yes. I was there when decisions were made by a group of sovereigns in China, from China, from Thailand, from Laos, which has 6 million people, and vast stores of rubies and diamonds, etc., still in the ground. They took, in a period of about 2 years, $55 trillion from the big houses, Lehman Brothers, Smith Barney, 55 trillion. Well, these major houses had about 125 trillion. So you think about this, you got $125 in the bank. Somebody takes $55 from that, and then you have to pay a fee of $20 on the transaction. That's the United States of America, wow. Right? So let us say what their leadership said, that since the collapse of that global power, that global entity, the 14 houses of Israel, we used to call them, the end product was that they were in dire need. So they were forced, as I heard some people say, to loot the treasury, with the aid of our heroes, they did. The first kick out was 1.7 trillion. The second kick out, 2.3 trillion. Altogether, that 55 trillion was replaced by about 17 trillion. The banks got all that, banks and insurance companies got all that from us. And that's why the schools are going to close down. They are going to, we're in bankruptcy. Hello, we're in bankruptcy. We are in this country is in bankruptcy. It just doesn't declare bankruptcy. That's why Bernanke just had to print $1 trillion in US dollar bills. You know about this, right? He's about to print another trillion. He's going to say 800 billion. The reason he says 800 billion is because it's going to cost him 200 billion. He's going to pay 200 billion in VIG, or you don't know the mafia statement, do you? VIG means the interest that you have to pay to the mafia when you do a hard money loan from them. The mafia in this case is China. So you have to pay 200 billion in order to be able to cut 800 billion out. That's all false money. None of that is real. That is our reality. So the combined situation of the criminalization of youth, 3 generations. So we're talking about the criminalization of everybody after my generation, right? Now, that's one hand. And on the other hand, a bankrupt empire. Where does that leave us? Where does that leave us? It seems to me, very quickly, we have to both think and act globally. That doesn't mean that we don't think and act locally. You have to do democratic struggles. You have to fight to maintain whatever you have. That's okay, there's nothing wrong with that. But some of us are gonna have to cut loose
Yes, sir.
and link ourselves with the rest of the world who now is beginning to understand this crisis. You think the Greeks don't understand this crisis now? You think the Irish don't understand this crisis now? We're not talking about a love affair now. We're not talking about sleeping together.
Okay.
We're talking about is there a way for us to at least come together to come to grips with that? I tell you what Buddhists are going to do. They're going to put up $20 trillion. And they want to put up $20 trillion to ameliorate the situation in black communities such that we can take on what they consider to be our natural leadership role for the next 50 to 100 years. I'm a very fortunate human being. And most people don't believe this. So unless you go with me, you won't know. But if you want to go with me, I can show you. I've seen warehouses full of gold ingots outside of Bangkok, Thailand. Mounds of rubies. These folks took their stuff out of the 14 houses of Israel. You know, when I say 14 houses, the 14 houses were the financial houses. I can pull them out and read them off to you. That might be the best thing to do. Lehman Brothers, Merrill Lynch. They were 14 houses of Israel because that's what they were. They were literally 14 houses of Israel. I mean, they were all.
Jesus, wrapped in face.
Morgan Stanley, AIG, Lehman Brothers, Goldman Sachs, Goldman Sachs, that's where both the Secretary of the Treasury and the first head of the council, the leader of the Economic Council almost everybody comes out of Goldman Sachs. Yeah. And Goldman Sachs, of course, survives. Bank of America, I think, brought Merrill Lynch. What has happened is a lot of these consolidated, 8 of them died. 8 of them either died or came into, were merged. The U.S. government put up nearly $3 trillion to save AIG, which was the insurance company that insured all these houses. Morgan Stanley, I think, just paid $156 million for stealing $27 billion.
Okay. When could I do that?
Well, what they did was that they had 2 sets of clients. They had one set of clients who they were urging to make bets into the toxic mortgage market. They had another set of clients who were betting that would fail. And Morgan Stanley was taking fees from both sets of clients. They were advertising for people to buy these toxic pieces of these. What they did is they packaged them or bundled them, and they would have people buy these, and on that they would base their wealth. And then they would, at the same time, they had somebody with a hedge fund, meaning hedging against that thing being happening. And so they just paid $156 million off of a theft of $27 billion. Now, I'm not much of a thief, but my thought is that if I could steal $100 and only have to pay back a cent, that's not a bad deal. I mean, if you want to do a deal, it's not a bad. If you're into that, I'm not saying anybody's into, but if you're into that, why not steal $27 billion if you only have to pay back 150? I mean, what is that? That's bonus money for a month for the people who are in charge of that wing. That's just bonus money. That's hangout money, right? So you don't get wired up about that. For us, it seems to me, one part of our work, and you folks scared me today because, as I said, I've been thrown out of several mega churches for raising the question about these toxic mortgages back in 2006, 2007. Because I heard it and I ran right back came back here and started, where did I see all these congregations of people who were taking these courses and how to make all this money from this and that and the other? Oh, I just talked to a sister whose father and mother, the mother was an inspector, father was an inspector for the post office, regional inspector for the post office. mother was an administrator for the Board of Education in LA. They stopped their jobs. They had bought 3 houses and had made $300,000 or $400,000 off it. They quit their jobs. They bought 12 houses. They were ready to go, right? Then the thing collapsed. They all bankrupt, right? Right? He works at Costco. Why? Because we get it late. First we get the wrong information, and then we get that late, right? We don't recognize that the stock market was set up for the elite.
Yes, sir.
That's right.
These toxic things were set up for the rulers. And when the masses get in, it's because a Ponzi scheme has been set up.
Right. That's right. It's the trap.
We're not dumb people. We are smart people. There are not no dummies in the room. If you see the rulers benefiting from this, the history is that they benefited off your exploitation, off your labor, off your condition. What would make you think? Well, that's the consciousness brother was talking about earlier today. We have the consciousness. We not only support the empire, we think we are the empire. We think we are. We really think we are. We aren't. We are not the empire. We do not rule. We are not 1%. So if we're not that 1%, so if we're going to restructure our relationship or build a relationship that we can restructure, we have to look for new partners in the world. We have to look for new associations in the world. Go outside the paradigm of the U.S. This is a bankrupt situation, folks. It is bankrupt. Some people think if they hold on to these 2 or 3 houses that they have to, and they doing Section 8 with, or whatever's the case, it will be, if it ever happens again, 20 or 25 years before buying a small number of houses as an investment will ever come back. Be 20, 25 years. 20, 25 years if it ever happens again. That's gone. That's finished. Now that doesn't mean that 1 or 2 or 3 people won't benefit. And usually there's somebody who thinks that they're smart enough to get past it, right? But the people who are doing the looting will look down and see you and say, that's somebody who's benefit. Get them for tax evasion. Get them for something, right? There's no space right now. The rulers are desperate. And when they're desperate, everything underfoot, that's up for grabs. You know, the time that they rape and pillage is when they most feel when they feel the most desperate. If one of the things we do begin to connect globally, that's my work right now. What I do every day, I work with a company called Gift. I'm co-owner of a group called Gift. We have a ministerial nonprofit. We have an education nonprofit. We have an NGO, and I'm based in Ho Chi Minh City, Saigon. I have a home there. I've lived between there and Oakland, California, for the last 10 years. And the main work is one side is humanitarian. We just broke ground on a hospital, $50 million just construction program, hospital in the highlands of Vietnam for Agent Orange victims. Agent Orange has a 200-year half-life, which means it'll be 500 years before it goes away. And then it affects the second and third and fourth generations more than it does the first generation. The second thing that, the second piece that we're doing is we just got an agreement to build a hospital in Sierra Leone for people who had their legs or their arms amputated during the war. So we're doing those 2 sets of things right now. We also want to build a prenatal clinic in the middle of that very large, there's a homeless camp in Nairobi. There's about 300,000 people in it. And they had a little clinic there, and people would break into it to get drugs or whatever. So we're going to try to build a prenatal and postnatal clinic in just outside that place. This money comes from Buddhist community. It comes from United Nations Development Program. It comes from sovereign funds. What I mean by sovereign funds, these are funds that are set aside by every government. Now, we don't talk about that Yeah, we can't even have this discussion. The sovereign funds in Thailand is about 20 to 25 trillion. Sovereign funds in China is about 200 trillion. There are two banks in China. They have a public bank and a private bank. They have a Bank of China that you can go into and almost no Chinese can go into. And that is the richest bank on the planet. That's who keeps the chits. That's the mafia for the, what was that family that was on TV?
Corleone.
Yeah, well, the Corleones, right.
Soprano.
The Sopranos. That's the folks that keep that. And then there's another bank that the Chinese own that they don't say they own called HSBC. It used to be called Hong Kong Shanghai Bank, the Hong Kong Shanghai Bank of China. It is now called it's called HSBC. There are many of us who bank there. That's their public bank, but that bank is owned by the Chinese. Absolutely owned by the Chinese.